All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you guys for joining us. My name is Jolie. I'm the Humane Educator here at the Peninsula Humane Society. I'm also joined by Ashley Kinney, our Wildlife Rehabilitation Department Manager, and she'll be chiming in a little bit later. Also wanted to say Happy Coyote Awareness Week. Today we're going to be talking about coyotes. Um, if you guys want to give me either a thumbs up or some sort of signal if you see coyotes in your area, in your neighborhood, or in parks nearby, just so I can get an idea of how many people are seeing coyotes. Cool. Okay. So we're going to start with the characteristics of coyotes. On the right, you can see we have a domesticated dog or a pet dog. And then below that is a picture of a coyote. So they definitely can have some things that are the same. So obviously you can tell that the coyote here is a lot skinnier. He also has this reddish brownish color. They tend to be reddish brownish or gray. And then their underbelly usually is lighter, so like a creamy white color. Um, they also have a long, skinny snout and a small head. They almost kind of look like a fox. And their long, bushy tails can sometimes even touch the ground, so they're quite long. In the wintertime, their coat is, of course, much thicker than it is in the summer. So I have two photos here that you can compare the two. They're both coyotes. However, one of them has the thinner coat and the other is thicker. And then in the in-between season, sometimes they might have patchy fur as they're shedding and molting. They tend to be at about 18 to 14 inches tall at their shoulder length. So they're pretty small and they can be 3 to 4.5 feet total in length, including their tail. And they'll weigh about 20 to 35 pounds. So in terms of their diet, they are opportunistic. So they'll eat kind of anything that they can find. Because of this omnivorous diet, they will do hunting. So when they hunt, they'll look for small animals like gophers and rats and squirrels and rabbits. You can see that top left photo. We have a guy that's eating a gopher. And then they will also eat songbirds and ducks, and they've even been seen eating owls before. They can also go after reptiles and amphibians. And then we have that guy eating a snake up there in the top right-hand corner. And then they can also get frogs. I've seen them picking apart turtles by the pond. They will, of course, get their hands on unattended cats and small dogs. They can eat trash, even if it's not good for them. They don't know that it's not gonna that it's not good for them and they might get a stomach ache. So make sure that you are closing up your trash, putting it away properly. And they can eat cat food and dog food that's left out. In my old neighborhood, we had somebody that was feeding the feral cats and they would just leave out cans of wet cat food, which would ultimately just attract the coyotes into the neighborhood. And then they can also forage for different types of vegetation like grasses and berries. And then you'll see there we've got all the different types of scats that you might find depending on what they are eating. So for example, the fruit might have some seeds in it. And if they are having natural prey like small animals, they might have a lot of fur in their scat. So that's just something to look out for. In terms of their vocalizations, just like our dogs at home, they make different types of sounds to communicate with other coyotes or maybe other animals that they encounter. So they'll be making growls and snarls and barking if they are feeling threatened, so more aggressive sounds. And then when they are feeling more playful, their sounds might be more like yips and whines and squeals, so more high-pitched sounds. And then they also have the ability to create howling sounds that make it sound like there's multiple coyotes. So you might hear coyotes howling thinking that it is a pack of coyotes, but it is only two of them. And then in terms of the coyote pack dynamics, Their structure is primarily composed of an alpha male and female, and then their current pups, and then sometimes their offspring from the previous year. Their hierarchy, so the breeding alpha pair are the dominant ones, maintaining a strict control while the subordinates will often assist in taking care of the pups. And they are very territorial, so especially when they are having their babies or when they're raising their babies, they will defend their areas, which can be 2 to 30 miles, square miles. And in order to mark their boundaries, they will urinate and leave their scat around their area. For their breeding and reproduction, it'll usually be the alpha pair that's typically breeding every year. And then when the pups are born in their dens during the springtime, they will be looking after them. And if the population happens to be threatened during that year, they might produce a larger litter, but typically it's just about 2. And then when they are foraging and hunting, they will often be alone, sometimes in pairs. And then if they are hunting, say, a deer, then they might hunt in a group so that there's more of them. The juveniles will often disperse in the late fall to establish their own territories, or some of them will just be solitary coyotes and go off on their own and do their own thing. So many of you have probably seen these signs, especially if you're going to a park. They might start popping up now because we are getting into the pupping season, which in the Bay Area is about March to September time, so right about now. They're also extra active during this time because they're going out to find food for their pups. Their actual den is only used temporarily for the pupping season, and then they're quickly outgrown and abandoned. Their dens might consist of openings under trees and rocks, which could be a pre-existing burrow from another animal, or they can dig their own dens from scratch. They can even den under your porch or under anything that's kind of left behind that can create a nice structure for them to live under. The coyotes will usually dig or find multiple dens in their territories, and then they might be moved around the dens several times within the first couple months of the pup's life, usually for safety reasons, or sometimes if there's a flea infestation in one of the dens, then they can move them all to a different den. So they'll have several options if they need to move around. They will be protecting their behavior, or their behavior will extend far beyond the immediate den itself. So it covers a large territory where the pups will eventually be exploring and hunting. So probably about a half a mile to a mile from the actual den site. How can we keep wildlife wild and safe? One of the most important things is to never feed or befriend them. So in terms of feeding them, purposely leaving food out for them or trying to approach them with food in your hand. If you do encounter one, make sure that you are keeping a far distance from them. So if you can, at least 75 feet, and do not approach them. If you do see a coyote when you are with your dog, make sure that your dog is on a leash and then walk away in the other direction. Emphasis on walk because you don't want to run and attract them. Avoid any rodenticides. If you do have a rodent issue, try and find a humane way to relocate the rodents. Rodenticides can cause animals to get really sick and die, not only coyotes, but owls and all other types of animals that eat rodents. This is their home too, just as much as it is ours. So please be respectful of their space and their needs. They are very important for our ecosystem. And again, if you do ever encounter a coyote and you feel unsafe, these are a couple of things you can do just to kind of scare them off, which is the same things you would pretty much do if you see a mountain lion, is you make yourself look big, you yell, you wave your arms, you stomp your feet. You're pretty much just trying to make yourself look really big and scare them away. How can we keep our pets safe from coyotes? If you have a small dog that you're out walking, be extra vigilant. And if you do encounter a coyote, if you can pick up your small dog just to keep them extra safe. And making sure that you're leashing your dogs and leaving the area when you do see a coyote. Do not ever let your dog play with or chase coyotes. Unfortunately, this does happen sometimes where people will let their dogs interact with coyotes, which of course doesn't go well for either the coyote or the dog. Keeping your cats indoors is very important. Of course, cats can be a prey to coyotes, but also there's a lot of other dangers to cats outside. And making sure you're properly disposing of trash, pet food that you're leaving outside. If you have fruit trees in your garden that have fruit falling on the floor, or if you have a bird feeder and there's seeds falling on the floor, raking that up, cleaning that up at the end of the day, just to make sure you're not attracting any coyotes to your area. Coyotes can jump pretty tall. They can jump and then kind of climb a little bit. So if you have fences that are less than 6 feet tall, a coyote can get into your yard. All right, why you should love and respect coyotes. There are many reasons. The first one being that they regulate our prey. So they keep the populations of rodents and rabbits and even deers in check, which stops them from over-consuming vegetation and damaging habitats, which supports a healthier plant life. They do mesocarnivore management. So mesocarnivores are animals like skunks and foxes and raccoons. So these are animals that are preying on small animals. So coyotes are indirectly protecting these ground nesting birds and songbirds and their eggs because there are less raccoons and foxes that are eating them. And so that will increase bird populations and diversity. They also improve our ecosystem health and nutrient cycling. So because they are scavengers, they clean up dead animals, they prevent the spread of disease and returning vital nutrients back into our soil. And their scat, like we saw earlier, might have seeds in it. So their scat can disperse seeds, helping plants grow and promoting even more plant biodiversity. They can also help control diseases and public health. So by reducing these rodent populations, they can help control the spread of rodent-borne diseases like hantavirus, which will benefit both the wildlife and, of course, humans. And they are a keystone species. So as a keystone species, their presence or their absence will significantly impact an entire ecosystem, maintaining the balance across diverse environments, including our urban environments, which is where most of us live. So if you ever do see a coyote, it is a good sign that we have a healthy ecosystem. And then Ashley Kinney is going to go over this slide for us.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the information, Jolie. That was great. And thank you for having me tonight. So I'm going to go over just the rehabilitation part of what we do here at Peninsula Humane Society for coyotes. So why do coyotes come into our care? So sometimes they're orphaned, meaning that the parental unit is no longer around, whether that's due to them being sick, injured, or sick or injured. Coyote pups and adults can also come in ill, so they can have distemper, they can be exposed to different toxins, they come in emaciated and sometimes with a high volume of parasitic loads, which can be external like mange, ticks, and fleas, or internal like roundworms. Again, they can be injured from hit by cars, skin infections. Sometimes they're also illegally trapped. They come in sometimes with illegal snare traps or just trapped in general, or like I said, poisoned before. Our goal is to rescue, rehabilitate, and release them back into their natural environment. So we follow detailed protocols to release fully self-sufficient, healthy coyotes that have a natural fear of humans back into the environment. We have large mammals that are fed natural food items and only given natural enrichment. We don't want these animals to imprint or habituate on anything human related. Like I said, we want them to be fully self-sufficient with a natural fear of human upon release, which is a release requirement for us. These guys do take a little bit long to develop and grow in care, so we tend to have them a little bit longer term than other species that we get. So we usually have them for roughly 5 to 8 months before returning them to their natural environment. And how do we select a appropriate release location? So we actually work with our governing agencies. We work very closely with California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and also local biologists that are either with Fish and Wildlife or Open Space District or even sometimes county parks to ensure that we are releasing them in an area that's appropriate for, that's not already overpopulated, that has space in the environment to accommodate new animals and also not around people. So we definitely work closely with local Fish and Wildlife staff members to ensure that we're releasing them in an appropriate environment. Okay.
Thank
And
you,
if you,
Ashley.
yep.
All right, well, that was it that we have for you guys. Hopefully that gave you a good idea of what to look out for as our pupping season starts right about now. We're happy to answer any questions that you have, which I think you can either put it in the comment section or feel free to just put your microphone on.
I have a questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, this is Charlene. So, thank you for the great presentation. There's a lot of good information, and I think is great for the community to learn about coyote and not to be too scared about them. If you
Right.
know them, you know how to handle them. That is a good way to do it. I do have a questions. I think. Ashley, I think you mentioned that one of the reason why coyote comes into PHS is mange. I know this is of a popular topics, so I just want to have a better understanding in what status of the mange that PHS will help, because I may have follow-up questions. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a very common question for us as well. So we do get a lot of calls, especially during the fall and winter season regarding coyotes with mange. And we do our best to assess the situation upon arrival to our facility if we are able to actually get the coyote into care. So a little history with coyotes, they're extremely smart and they are very trap shy. So when we do have an animal that is sick with mange, mainly the adults, the juveniles and the adults that can actually, they're mobile and they can get away. They don't want anything to do with that trap. So it's very difficult to get them. And unfortunately, we have to wait until they are at a mobilized state, meaning that they're too weak to evade us while we're going out there to capture them for potential rehabilitation. Now, mange and coyotes, it's definitely rough. So there are times where we do have to humanely euthanize them because they're too far debilitated to actually have a successful rehabilitation. So that does tend to happen sometimes with coyotes, again, because they are trap shy and it takes so long for them to get into our care and they're already very, very down. Does that answer
So
your question?
kind of yes and no.
Okay.
So thanks for the explanation. I
Yeah.
understand, they are trap shy. So in
Mhm.
that case, it sounded like most of the time, by the time you're able to trap them, it's almost time to euthanize them. Am I kind of like in the right track on that?
So we actually, as Peninsula Humane Society, we actually cannot trap wildlife. So we have to follow state ordinances surrounding trapping wildlife, and we have to go through a lot of chain of command within the state, and we tend to go to California Department of Fish and Wildlife when there's a situation, and if they are able to trap and if they are able to get the animal to us, great. But we do not have the resources or the permits to physically trap a coyote or a wild animal.
So in that case, would you advise that if anybody who sees a coyote who is sick or mange or whatever reason, they should contact wildlife, Fish and Wildlife directly?
So if it's a mange case that we're tracking, we definitely would like to know of the situation. But on this slide, you can see up top for wildlife emergencies, you can call the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And they also, on their website, they do have a wildlife reporting line or a page to fill out and submit so they can track where these animals are. And if they do have the resources to go out and assist or at least go out and see the situation, see how far gone these animals are, they can definitely help as well. So California Department of Fish and Wildlife is definitely a good resource to have in these situations. Again, if a trap is needed, that's who we would go for.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
All right, we also had a question about locations. So we have 3 locations that you can bring wildlife to. You can find the specific address on our website if you click on wildlife at phs-spca.org, but we have our location in Burlingame, our location in Saratoga, and our location in San Jose. So you can either bring wildlife to us, and then in the San Mateo County, you can also call our animal control department and they can go and pick up the animals and bring them back to us. There's also a question about coyotes going rabid. I'm not sure if there are any in California that have been rabid recently, or if we've gotten any. Ashley, do you know?
Yeah, so as far as I'm aware, there's no recent cases of rabies in coyotes. It is more common on the East Coast to have those animals test positive for rabies. But here in our area and in California, there's no recent reporting.
Cool. There was also a question about let's see, where did it go? How coyotes know when to produce more offspring when the population goes down. And from my understanding, it is when there is an abundance of food and the packs are thinned out. So if there was some sort of like disease or something that wiped a bunch of coyotes out, then they can have the ability to have larger litters if there is enough food to do so. I saw a small dog in a coyote-proof garment. Do they work? I think that they would definitely be helpful. I know that I've seen, little chihuahuas wearing the little spiky vests, not only for coyotes, but for large birds of prey, depending on where you live. I haven't heard any stories of them like, a coyote being chased or a coyote chasing a dog and then they can't chase the dog anymore when they tried to get a hold of the dog. But I do think that that would definitely be helpful if you live in an area where there's lots of coyotes and you have a really tiny dog. Do we know how many coyotes we have in the San Mateo County? I do not know. I know that there is a population count in San Francisco because of Janet Kessler. She has a whole map of all the different packs of coyotes. They all have names. They all have their different territories. But for the San Mateo County, I do not know. Again, Ashley, do you? I don't know if there's anybody who has been keeping track.
I don't know of anyone keeping track within San Mateo County, but we do know that they definitely have healthy populations.
Yeah, the San Mateo County is quite large, so it would be pretty difficult to have any idea of how many specifically coyotes there are. Is it correct that coyotes with mange will seek out sunshine that will help clear the mange? I don't know much about mange. I think that UVB rays do have a lot of benefits. And so maybe it can help in some ways, but I don't think it would completely get rid of the mange.
Julie, yes, you're correct. So sometimes the sunshine will actually help. If it's a mild case, it can definitely help clear it. And some of the coyotes are known for taking dust baths and sometimes even fully submerging themselves in water, then a dust bath, and then sunshine to try to self-treat. Again, it's usually successful if it's a minor case of mange, not necessarily a full-blown infestation.
Mm-hmm. We have another question. What happens if you release a coyote and it does not work out? Um, Not exactly sure what you mean by it does not work out. I'm assuming you mean um, they do not survive or they try to return to an area. Um, how long is the gestation period for coyotes? That's a good question.
You want me to answer that one?
Yeah, if you know it off the top of your head, I don't know that one.
Yeah, so they generally go into estrus, which is roughly around January to March, and their estrus phase usually lasts about 10 days. And then their gestation period is anywhere from 60 to 63 days. And they usually birth pups anywhere from March through May.
Pretty fast. Okay. Um, so someone said that there is a wildlife rehabilitator in Southern California that treats animals with mange in the field. Is there any group like that in the Bay Area, Ashley?
That's a great question, and that's a very common question. But no, there is not. There's a lot of legality surrounding field treatment using the medication that they use in the field. There's a risk of overdosing non-targeted animals, such as your pets, such as children, that might access the medication, and we are not. Rehabilitators are not legally permitted to distribute any type of medication that needs to be prescribed by a veterinarian in the field. It also takes a lot of resources to monitor the field and baiting station, and it takes more than one person. You need to have biologists, you need to have veterinarians on site, and it's actually very, very dangerous because there is a high risk of overdosing an animal if you gauge the weight wrong. The medication that they use is fairly harsh on the system, and if we're using it on an animal that might be immunocompromised, we can also unfortunately kill the animal in trying to rescue it. So field baiting and medicating within the field is not something that PHS is authorized to do.
Thank you. We also had a question. Sometimes we hear howling at night. Is there a way to tell if it's coming from foxes or coyotes in the Santa Cruz Mountains? We have gray foxes here and then coyotes. So it could definitely be foxes as well because they do howl. But I wouldn't be able to tell you which one just from that. I would highly suggest going on YouTube though, and then searching gray fox howls and coyote howls and see if you would be able to tell the difference between the two. If anything, you might be hearing both because there's definitely both gray foxes and coyotes in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Is PHS doing anything about rodenticides and animal immunity? No, not really. We definitely suggest to do things more humanely if you're having a rodent issue. But I don't think we're actively deterring people from using rodenticides. Wild care in Marin San Rafael will take wildlife that's injured. Yes, they're great as well. There is also a wildlife rehabilitation center in San Francisco, which you can either bring them to SFACC or you can bring them directly to her house. I can't remember her address, but and she lives somewhere in the Outer Mission area. Is mange highly contagious? It is very contagious, yes. To humans or other animals. It is contagious, yes, but it's not very likely that you would get it. If anything, your pets could get it, but I have never seen or heard anybody's pet getting mange unless they are stray and they are kind of out on their own. I think we have gotten some dogs that have come to us with mange before, if I'm correct. I have a group of 5th grade students with me today. They are wondering what we can do to spread coyote awareness. Yeah, I think telling everybody about what you learned today and letting people know that coyotes are a very important part of our ecosystem, that again, they are a keystone species. So they have a lot of control over the ecosystem and the food chain. Keeping your pets safe from coyotes, so leashing them up and monitoring them when they're outside playing and running around. Not leaving out food or poisons for them. You can also do some sort of donation drive, raising money for your local wildlife rehabilitation center to help rehabilitate coyotes, and just in general, spreading awareness about what you've learned today. I think I've got all the questions. All right, well, if anybody thinks of any other questions later on, you can feel free to email me or Ashley Kinney. Our emails are on our website, but mine is jcole@phs-sbca.org, and Ashley's is akinney@phs-sbca.org as well. Okay. Thank you all so much, and I hope you guys stay cool during the heat wave.
I think there's one more question in the chat that someone just put it in.
Oh, this one. Are there any other things we can do to our yards to make them less alluring? I would say, again, cleaning up any fallen fruit. If you have bird feeders, raking the seeds off of the grass or the yard. Water does, of course, attract them. So if you have a bird bath or a pond, that could be something that might be attracting them. And then, of course, cat, dog food, anything like that. If technically your area is opened up, like if you don't have a fence, then it's going to be harder to deter them, or depending on what kind of neighborhood you're living in. But they are looking for food, water, and shelter. So if you have any of those things in your yard, then they could potentially come through. Okay, Brian is asking, if we see a coyote in the wild with mange that keeps coming and hanging out in the same neighborhood, what should we do to help them? Ashley, do you want to go for that one?
Sure. Generally, like I said before, they are difficult for animal control agencies to capture, but the thing that we can do to help them is just tracking when we see them, and keep calling our wildlife department if we are in your jurisdiction, just to let us know it's still happening, and also fill out the submission form through California Department of Fish and Wildlife. It is their I believe it is wildlife interaction or wildlife incident form, and it goes directly to the state coordinator and the local game wardens, and they can help also track where that animal is, to see if we can get them some intervention.
And then just for reference, this is our website up here, phs-sbca.org. If you click on wildlife and you scroll down to here, if you click into any of these, you'll get our addresses and phone numbers for these locations. If you do encounter a sick, injured, or orphaned wildlife, and there's a few other resources here as well.